Enrichment, Enlightenment, Transformation. Rabbi Yisroel Cutler, the spiritual leader of Chabad of Cary, North Carolina, guides anyone who has been searching for a meaningful life and conscious living. Join our discussions about the mundane, our daily activities, and then infuse every day with a spiritual twist from the inspired sages of the Talmud and Jewish mysticism, which many call Kabbalah. We learn from the root source of all religious monotheistic traditions and delve into the symbolism and levels of meaning from biblical stories.
If anyone else is listening in to the live stream, let us know. Ask questions. We love your participation. This will be our last class for December. So we're not going to be next week or the week afterwards. So January, God willing, we will be back. And for that reason, we're going to go to the last lesson in here, lesson 11, which is on the sense of smell. Okay?
204.
204. 204. And I guess if someone were to ask me what is, the least important sense, God forbid one had to be affected, which sense seems least important, I would probably go with smell. Any other thoughts? I know we want them all.
Vision.
I'll take my vision.
It would be a choice between taste and smell.
Taste and smell.
Because most of your tasting is through smell.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah. Yeah, if you hold your nose, you won't taste anything.
Is the door locked? Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
Come on in.
Hey.
So most of your tasting is through smell? That I did not know. Very interesting.
Taste.
Smell seems to be one that is, not as important. Obviously, vision, touching, hearing, those are critical to life. Smell seems to be more of a bonus. But as we're going to see today, that really the soul functions in two ways. Today's class is a little bit different, a little more mystical. There is the practical, functional dimensions of the soul, okay? And then there's the essential parts of the soul. So on the functional level, certainly smell is not as important as the other senses. On the essential component of the soul, the nose plays a very important role, and we're going to get there in a moment. And really, we can say that about all of our faculties. There is the functional vision, and then there's the essential vision. There is the level of the soul that manifests itself in the body, and then there's the higher level of the soul. So how are we going to get into all of this? How do we get into the sense of smell? A very interesting medrash about Jacob passing away. Those that have taken the JLI on end of life have heard this medrash before. Let us begin. Text 1, page, what was it in there?
204.
204. This is at the way end when Jacob and Joseph are reunited together. They're living in Egypt. The family is together again. We're getting ahead in the story. This is next week's parsha. We're not meeting here next week. And what happens there, Marty, why don't you begin? Text 1.
Now it comes to pass after these incidents that someone said to Joseph, "Behold, your father is ill." So he took his two sons with him, Manasseh and Ephraim. And someone told Jacob and said, "Behold, your son Joseph is coming to you." And Israel summoned his strength and sat up on the bed. Jacob called for his son and said, "Gather, and I will tell you what will happen to you at the end of days." And Jacob concluded, commanding his sons, and he drew his legs up into the bed and expired and was brought in to his people.
He was 147 years old.
Poor thing.
It's an old man. And he felt he was getting old. The word in Hebrew, behold, I am getting old. The word is hine, behold. The Medrash points out it was like a surprise to him. Oh my, I'm getting sick. This is a surprise. And the Medrash tells us, and those that have taken the JLI are familiar with this, that up until Jacob, people did not have signs that they were getting old. They did not feel themselves gradually deteriorating. Rather, that was something that began with Yaakov began with Jacob. We have more chairs in the closet there. So why don't we do that? Text 2a. Do you mind reading, Pam?
From the day that heaven and earth were created, no one ever fell ill, and only afterwards died. Rather, wherever one was located, whether on the road or in the marketplace, he would sneeze and his soul would leave by way of his nostrils. Until our forefather Jacob prayed to God about this, saying, Master of all worlds, don't take my soul from me before I have the opportunity to give instructions to my children and my household. God granted him his request. As the verse says, after these events, Joseph was told, behold, your father is ill. All of the kings of the world heard of this and were amazed, since nothing like this had happened since the heaven and earth were created.
That's sort of what God bless you.
Keep on going. Well, yeah, sit down, absolutely.
Rabbi,
Yes.
real quick, either the people there are whispering or you are not using the microphone? Because
Can you
we can
hear me?
I can we can hear, but none of the other ones. I mean, I have to raise the volume all the way up to hear
Let us
them.
move the microphone
So-
to the center of the room.
Move the microphone. Let me see if it's even connected. I don't hear anybody handling that microphone.
You do not.
So I do not. So what you need to do, to go to tools.
Give
and
me one
option-
moment. Let us change the microphone.
Testing.
Nope, no good yet. Until you save it. You go to tools
Correct?
and then
Audio
options, audio
Microphone.
settings, and choose the microphone. No, now I can't hear you at all. No. Is the microphone on? No, cannot hear anybody. Not you and not them. Isaac, is the microphone switched on? The microphone itself.
Okay, now
Okay, now we hear something.
it has a red light on it.
It didn't for a second.
I can't hear you though.
Hello?
Yeah, that's tell somebody to tap on the microphone.
Yeah.
Yep, that is the microphone.
Yes, you hear?
Okay, what is the level on it?
Hi.
It's something is not working right. Okay, go back now. I don't want to take too much of your time.
We unplug the microphone and do it the other way?
I can hardly hear you. What?
Is it
Oh,
this?
yeah, now it's loud.
Okay, so we'll do without the microphone today.
Okay.
So what is our medrash? Our medrash tells us that prior to Jacob passing away, people passed away suddenly. I don't believe the medrash is saying that the sneeze killed someone. That's a legend. That's not what it means. What it does mean is it was sudden. They passed away, and the way that would be, it wasn't that it was the sneeze of death. They passed away, and the sneeze was the way that one would be able to see that they had passed away. It was the physical manifestation of it. Okay? It doesn't mean the sneeze was this cause of death. I'm just reading the medrash here.
So why do we say Gesundheit?
So from here, keep on reading. Therefore,
A world without allergies.
therefore,
A person is duty bound to say to life, when another sneezes, to thank God that this death was turned to life.
so we say labriyut in Hebrew, we say gesundheit, we say all sorts of expressions.
Not very sneeristic.
What?
It's not very sneeristic.
To what?
It's a pun. It's a pun.
Okay. So that is the source for these terms. Yaakov says, I want some knowledge before I pass away, that my family, I should have time to instruct them, to guide them, to bless them. He doesn't ask for sickness, God forbid, like, terrible sicknesses. He asks for a gradual weakening of the body so that he knows he's going to pass away. And in the JLI, we had a whole discussion, if we had the choice, would we reverse that or not? Is that a good thing or not? We're not going to visit that conversation today.
Well,
It's a very odd request of Yaakov. Yeah.
it could be a sign of getting older, like having white hair, having some wrinkles on your face. I mean, it doesn't,
Why did it have to be a sickness? Yeah.
Right, it seems like there's quite a difference between being a vibrant elderly person or being sick. And we do attribute sneezing with catching a cold and contagious disease and things like that.
Correct. But the Midrash actually says 2 generations earlier, Abraham asked for looking old.
Okay,
And that began with Abraham, because Abraham and Isaac, people would confuse. They look similar. Abram said, we got to know who the tata is and who the kid is.
Right.
Let me look older.
'cause they look
Request accepted. 2 generations later, Jacob says, that's not enough. Yes, I look old, but I don't know when my time is coming. I want to have a gradual weakening of the body to allow me to properly take care of my children. That's what he asks
He
for.
didn't
That's
know
why
what
they
he was
need
asking.
doctors.
Yeah. And a whole industry was born.
That's right.
And we're not going to argue. The point is, it's very odd. Yes?
How do you get that from this? He says, Master of the worlds, don't take my soul from me before I have the opportunity to give instructions to my children in my household. That just sounds like, give me a little time, I know I'm dying, give me a little time.
Well, look at the way it words it. First, a person would sneeze and they would pass away right away. And then he says, Master of the world, I want some opportunity. And then it says, your father is ill. So the illness preceding death seems to be something new. I don't want to get too caught up on that because the class is long, yeah?
Yeah, and maybe you get to this later in the class. Jacob, Israel, is the only one that doesn't die.
It doesn't do that in this class. We're not going there. That's an interesting thought. In any event, it is fascinating how the Medrash, whether you want to take it literally or metaphorically, associates death with sneezing. Now, one way of looking at that is, how is Adam created? God blows the spirit of life into him. So would it not make sense that if Hashem blows the spirit of life into Adam, the spirit of life, so to speak, leaves via nostrils? Very interesting. And a physical manifestation of that was via a sneeze, but that is where the entire tradition began, to say God bless you. I looked on Wikipedia historically what they say about that. They said during the Black Plague, one of the symptoms of people that had it was they would always be sneezing. So then it was always, oh no, God bless you, That was the historical association of when that came to be. I just found it interesting. But this is actually in Jewish law as well. There's a powerful association between nostrils and the breath of life. I want to go through this fast, but because I want to get to the main part of the class, but in text 3, the halacha is, well, why don't we read this out loud? Janice?
One who is buried in a collapsed building and there is doubt whether he is alive, or there is doubt whether or not the person is even there at all, we violate the Sabbath to rescue him, to save a life, even though there are multiple doubts if a life will actually be saved.
To explain, you don't do regular, removal of buildings on Shabbat. That would be considered work. So if a building collapsed and you got to clear away all the debris, that would generally not be an activity done on Shabbat. If there's any doubt that someone is there, then all of a sudden it's a matter of saving a life. Even if it's 1%, even if it's 0.5%, any percent on Shabbat overrides the prohibition of doing activity on Shabbat. Keep on reading.
Even if the rescuers find the victim crushed in a manner that even if he is alive, he can only survive for a brief while, they still continue to violate the Sabbath to attempt to rescue him, continuing the effort until revealing the victim's nostrils. If they do not sense any life, then he has certainly died.
So now today, obviously, there are more sophisticated ways of determining life. Obviously, respiration alone is not it. Someone could not be breathing but still be alive. But in halacha, there's a very strong association between life and nostrils. And isn't it interesting that, also historically, when someone fainted, what did you do to revive them?
Smelling something.
Incense. Smelling something.
It's interesting. So there is this correlation, there is this association between nose and life. And finally, text 4 is along the lines of what I was saying. Why don't we do this, Jersey?
And he breathed into his nostrils the soul of life. Know that the nose is a vehicle for the soul, the place where she enters and then leaves. This, then, is why our sages require that one who got trapped beneath a building on the Shabbat be checked until his nose, as it is stated, everything that has the breath of the spirit of life in its nostrils.
Okay, so why the nose? That's the question. Why in Torah would there be this association between life and nose? I understand life and heart, life and breath, life and brain. The nose seems to be an odd sense to have this correlation, this association with life.
And really establishing breath through the nose. If there was any other way to establish breath, the existence of breath, you would do it maybe through the mouth. But
Maybe
they're
blow out
talking
a
about the
candle?
nose.
What?
I don't know if it's just, to me, it's more the breath, not the nose.
Right. The breath happens to happen through the nose.
Maybe
Okay.
blow out a candle or make a candle go like this
With what?
with breath or with nostril breathing.
Right.
So the
Speak
flame,
up.
blow out a candle, have the air blow we're talking about how to determine if somebody's breathing or not. So
Right.
I'm suggesting that 2,000 years ago, they may have wanted to put a candle there and watch it
Well,
move.
that's through the mouth, not the nose. You
Not
would blow a
necessarily.
candle, right?
They would put a feather on the person's nose,
Okay.
whether or not to see there was any movement. That was something that was done. So the nose had this association. So we're going to take a step back now and explain a sense we usually don't. We've had many classes on the difference between hearing and seeing, and what hearing represents in Judaism and seeing represents in Judaism. What does smelling represent?
The incense, which are correct.
It seems to be the least important, as I began today, of all the senses. God forbid if one was to be taken from me, all right?
But
couldn't
you know,
taste
but,
anything.
but when you say the morning prayers, when you talk about the sacrifice, and God says, smells good to me.
Right.
Smell is the
Smell,
metaphor. It's
so
interesting.
He's talking about the
Interesting.
sacrifice and then the incense. It's not just the sacrifice.
So there is something deep about smell in Judaism. Deep. Deep. Not necessarily on the functional level. On the functional level, seeing is more important. Hearing is more important. But on the essential level, when it comes to life, the existence, the essence, there's something about smell. Yeah.
I think it had to be very puzzling that matter, which you could physically see and hold, turned into something that appeared to evaporate. So I wonder whether that's not part of the significance. It becomes-
Yeah, that's what she was saying. Reach nechayach, Hashem smell, you know. Where else in Jewish scriptures does it talk about the sense of smell being utilized to discern things? So there's an interesting text 5a. Much later, this is in Isaiah. This is one of the famous root sources of Mashiach, a Messiah, in Tanakh. Text 5a.
And a shoot shall spring forth from the stem of Jesse.
What is Jesse? Jesse is Yishai, who is the father of King David. So there will be an offshoot. There will be a descendant from Yishai.
And a twig shall sprout from its roots. And the Spirit of God shall rest upon him, a spirit of wisdom and understanding, a spirit of counsel and heroism, a spirit of knowledge and fear of God.
Mhm.
And he shall be animated by the fear of God, and neither with the sight of his eyes shall he judge, nor with the hearing of his ears shall he chastise.
So how is he going to judge if he's not doing it via his ears or via his eyes?
Smell?
So even look at the Hebrew over here, and you whoever knows Hebrew will appreciate it. It says, "Vaharicho beyirat Adonai." He will be animated by the fear of God. Vaharicho. What does reyach mean in Hebrew? Smell. Smell. Yeah. So he will be smelling. It uses the translation animated, but he will have a sense of smell with yirat Adonai, with the awe of God. Reyach, ruach. Interesting. Again, ruach is spirit. Reyach is smell. Very interesting.
Are those just vowel differences?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's-
So it says he will not judge through eyesight. He will not judge through hearing. How will he judge? Save the comment for one moment. The Talmud writes on that with that play of words. V'haricho. The Talmud writes how 5b.
It is stated, and the Spirit of God shall rest upon him, a spirit of wisdom and understanding, a spirit of counsel and heroism, a spirit of knowledge and fear of God. And he shall be animated by the fear of God. Rabbah said, he smells a man and judges, as it is written, and he shall not judge after the sight of his eyes.
So the Talmud tells us a new meaning of it doesn't smell right, right? It doesn't smell right. There is a sense, there's an intuition that happens via smell. Yeah, Judy.
There's the expression, I smell a rat.
So what does that mean? What does that mean when you say you smell a rat?
Well, you're sensing it. You're sensing something's not right.
Via?
Just regular conclusions. I don't believe scent is.
Correct. So I don't know where the modern expression came from, but the point is, it's not something that is empirical. It's not something I can explain. It's not something that's based upon it's just a sense that I have. You're right. The smell.
Doesn't pass a sniff test. That's the expression.
So I don't know where all these we can't draw any conclusions from English expressions where I don't know where they came from. But the Torah does say he will smell with Yirat Adonai. Yes, Debbie.
Well, we think about the the use of scent, like for a dog, and it's the instinct. It's our God-given knowledge within us rather than interpreting. So it's something that is very direct. Plus, we connect very closely the nose and taste. It's blended inside of us. So when you get all of these phrases, it's combining. So if you close your nose, you can take medicine and you won't taste how bad it is.
Sure.
So in order to discern, we have to use our instinct as well as our intellect and our heart. We have to use all these components.
Correct. And I've heard actually before that smell actually is a very strong, when you go back to a place you visit, like your grandma's house, and there's like a certain smell that it immediately brings you to. What?
Association.
Association is very strong. So on one hand, it's something that we consider to be weak, at least in terms of practically its input in our lives. On the other hand, it's rooted, some are very deep, and I like the dog example, where they have a heightened sense of smell that is very, very powerful. We don't have that so much. But if the world were to change, and there would be this revelation of godliness all over the world, that would be something we would sense. And it says Mashiach has this ability to use that sense in order to discern these things. Okay.
And I've said before that a mother knows their child through the sense of smell. It is the connection of humans that they know who you,
Interesting.
When you're next to somebody, you know through their scent of smell.
So
There's actually a Nobel Prize was awarded for that by a Jewish guy, Axel.
Really?
In 2004 for the brain-nose connection and how it's complicated and how it's trained too over the course of time. Like we might smell something and it smells bad, or we might smell animal poop and it smells bad, but if you're tracking an animal, it might smell good to you. So there's a whole
Interesting.
It's a big connection there.
Yeah.
Biochemistry.
I remember I read also that taste also comes from smell.
Taste.
Right.
Yeah,
That it's like 80% of your taste is really going through that
Right.
sense of
So that's why when you have a cold, you don't taste things as powerfully. Okay. So in Hasidus and Kabbalah, it says that when it comes to practical life, it doesn't seem to have that much of an input. However, when it comes to the essence, the existence of life itself, it is a very powerful sense. And Hasidus asks an interesting question. It says, why does food give us life? Why is it? It's a funny thing. God made us. We're spiritual people. We're a soul that comes into a body. And I need to eat some food to keep my soul here. It's a funny thing. You're going to give me a scientific answer for that. Now, why is it that as a God puts a soul in a body, just think about it for a moment, and if you don't eat stuff, the soul leaves?
It's like you put gas in a car.
Again, I know, but imagine someone never knew this before, and you were explaining to them why they have to eat. They're like, "What? I have to go put that in my mouth, and that keeps my soul over here? Why should I? It keeps my body. It keeps my body, and if my body deteriorates, then the soul has nowhere to go." Yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean, the soul is bound up with the body.
Correct.
And when the body expires, the soul leaves.
So, right, if the body no longer is functioning, so you would say that the food is feeding the body, and it is when the body is no longer functioning, then the soul departs. I think that would be a good perspective. Look at the way, however, Chassidus 6a writes it. Debbie?
The soul is essentially distant from the body. The fact that they do indeed bond is only by virtue of God's immeasurable powers that can fuse material with spiritual.
Hold it there. It's an amazing thing that a soul and a body even, it's a funny shidduch. Yeah, it's a funny shidduch to take a physical body and a godly soul and fuse them together. That alone is interesting. It's God's immeasurable powers that do that. All right?
Due to this essential tension, the connection can sometimes be weakened or concealed. This is the purpose of eating and drinking, to strengthen the connection of soul to body. The intent is the divine spark vested in the bread.
So it isn't just the physical bread that gives life to the body, but interestingly enough, every food has it in it a godly spark also that animates it, that puts it into existence. The soul needs that for some reason to keep its existence in the body. Let's finish the text.
Right, so we need the
We-
sense of smell.
Well, we'll see. This is all food. This is not smell yet.
Because the bread is rooted in an eternal divine light, it has the power to strengthen the connection of soul to body and vivify the body in an internal manner.
So Chassidus says, it's a verse in the Torah actually. Not by bread alone do you live, but rather, and remember how that text finishes? How does that text finish? Not by bread alone does man live, rather. I want to get it.
It's not by bread alone.
Not by bread alone does man live. It's from Devarim.
And it's used so
By the word of Hashem that is in it. That's not Kabbalah. No, by the word of Hashem, but on the words. So Chassidus explains it isn't the physicality of the bread, but the spark of God in the bread that fuses body and soul together. So this is what Chassidus and Kabbalah say. When it comes to the regular day-to-day joining of body and soul, that happens via food. That happens via the taste. However, when it comes to the essence, keep on reading to 6b. Debbie?
However, when the soul departs from the body, such as in the case of when one faints, heaven forfend, food and drink do not help. It is specifically smell which will help, as it has the ability to access the essence of the soul, for smell is rooted in the lofty, all-encompassing levels of godliness.
So day-to-day life, what do we do to keep the soul in the body? Food does the job. What happens when someone passes out, they faint? What was typically used? Smelling salts. Because that hits in a more essential place. Food, that's the day-to-day, what's called or pnimi, the internal light, the regular external vivifying force inside of us. The essential one, that is the soul. That is smell. So I'm going to skip a lot of these mystical texts here, but because I want to go to the practical dimension here. When it comes to the practical side of life, sense might be not as important. However, in Torah and mysticism, sense is related to soul. Sense of smell is related to the fact that we are kept in existence. And therefore, we have a new meaning to Mashiach, smelling. What would the meaning be? Today we need to judge based upon what we see in the revealed state. The facts, what our eyes. We don't have the discernment. We aren't able to zoom into the essence. We're not able to sense that which we can sense. And we have to do it with just our eyes and ears. But if someone was really in line with a person's essence, they would be able to determine that person through which the smell is the metaphor that is given. Okay. Let's explain this a little bit more.
Rabbi, this is very important in today's day and age because we are living on a virtual world. We're not in the same space. We're not in the same room. We cannot smell across. They talk about smell-o-vision, smell-o-vision. And photography can be with changed and morphed, and we don't really know that what we see is the reality. And so, and what we hear, we don't know is the game of telephone. So the actual fact on the ground is that we have to be connected through smell.
Because that's a real 3D, real life animated relationship. As opposed to just this 2D kind of image.
We're distant.
So what we're saying is Mashiach will have the ability to truly take a 3D analysis of the person, the entire person, the motives and the background and where they're coming from and their Yetzer Hara. And today we don't do that. In fact, not only don't we do that, but a judge in Torah, a judge in Torah, in the legal sense, if you're a judge in Torah, what are you supposed to take into consideration? Now we're going to jump to the practical here. Section 3, page 9. If you're a judge in Torah, what are you supposed to take in consideration? Text 9, it's a short one. Jackie, text 9.
What page is that?
215.
215?
Yeah. The judge says, don't try to be the Torah says, if you're a judge, don't try to be Mashiach over here. What are you supposed to judge based upon? Keep on reading. A judge.
Am I pronouncing?
Oh, this one up
Oh,
here?
a judge must be guided only by that which his eyes see.
A judge is not supposed to, maybe the person did teshuvah. Maybe the person had a really, really bad Yetzer Hara, and that's the reason why they did what they did. No, if you're a judge in the legal sense, you have to judge based upon empirical evidence. That's what you do. You're not God. After 120 years, God might have a very different measure of judging each person, knowing the challenges they have. But a judge is supposed to judge based upon what the eyes see. That might be true in the legal sense. But when it comes to personal relationships, here's where it is important to be Mashiach-like. What does it mean, Mashiach-like? Text 10. And this is a beautiful thought from the previous Rebbe. All right, why don't you read? We'll go back around. Yeah, okay. Text 10.
Chewing.
Okay, chewing.
Mashiach's judgment will not be administered solely based on what he will see or hear. Rather, as the verse states, and he shall judge the poor justly, and he shall chastise with equity the humble of the earth. This is a marvelous thing, superseding the natural order. When people judge one another, whether in public or privately in their hearts, they rely on what their eyes see and what their ears hear, without entering into the heart of the person they are judging. The judge does not reckon with the defendant's position or environment, seeking to look to the reasons or circumstances which brought the defendant to his or her current way of life. Judgment is passed strictly based on what is seen and heard, and not based on the life experiences of the defendant. Such judgment is not the truest form of justice. Rather, it is a dry justice built on convenient principles. True justice can only be achieved when the judge places himself in the shoes of the defendant. An honest judge must seek to gain knowledge of all the circumstances that brought the defendant to such a situation.
Okay, and that, of course, is best said by Hillel, text 11, Al tadines chavercha ad shetagia lemkomo, don't judge your fellow until you have stood in his place. And of course, you can never stand in someone's place, so you can't ever judge someone. So we have sort of a difference. In the legal court system, well, here's a question. In the legal court system, should judges take in consideration background, environment, and all these
What do you
things?
do for sentencing?
You
Not
have
for guilt or
character
innocence.
people.
Marty, what do you...
Not for guilt or, not whether the person's guilty or not, but what the sentence should be, what the punishment should be. If they take into consideration that. And they
How
get
much they've
witnesses.
been brought.
Yeah, any other thoughts?
There's
Where we get it?
mitigating circumstances to the crime. It doesn't matter, the person might be guilty, right?
Okay, so
Because-
guilty or innocent, you're saying they don't take that into consideration, but when it comes to the sentencing, they do.
Well, they do a little bit if it's murder
Right.
one or
They do it
manslaughter.
in-
That's different, but I'm talking about this person grew up in a really difficult environment.
Circumstance of the person versus the circumstance.
I'm not talking about the circumstance of the crime, or
That they do for the penalty phase.
do they? If someone grew up on the streets of Harlem
What?
and witnessed murder from a young age, they wouldn't be sentenced the same way as someone else?
It might not be, that's consideration they take in, because they're gonna get witnesses from the family, they're gonna get witnesses from the victim, and determining that. But because
Interesting.
they have a variety of sentences they can give,
Yeah, they have guidelines.
guidelines, right?
Unless it's a drug offense by which you have no leniency.
Right, we'll
Boom.
join you in jail.
And I think part of what we're seeing
One
here
second.
is the principle of American justice is rehabilitation. And we could say we're probably a long ways away from the.
Absolutely.
That's his theory, right?
But, right, like in theory, it's not punishment, but rehabilitation. So
Right.
your circumstance, in theory, should apply.
So it's almost as if Torah says in the legal sense, especially as humans today, it's a very tough thing to do. And therefore there has to be law that apply to everyone equally, because there's no... where does it end? Where does it end? However, if you're really in tune with someone, if you really are a holy individual, if you really are imbued with the Spirit of God, as is Mashiach is going to be, then you have the ability to judge someone not just from their external. And what's the external? The metaphor for external was seeing and hearing, but rather from their essence. And in Jewish mysticism, which sense best expresses essence? Smell. And that is why by Mashiach it says smell. And what does it mean in our own life? Most of us, maybe there's some attorneys in the room, but most of us are not in the court system, and we're not having to decide things legally. We are just judging personally. We can be Mashiach-like in that
Yeah,
sense.
because we have a sixth sense.
We should employ our sixth sense when we judge people. And what does that mean? As Hillel says, don't judge someone until you've stood in his place. What are those things you don't know? You don't know, obviously, his background. You don't know circumstances. There's a famous story that Stephen Covey, is that how you pronounce? Covey writes in his book where he was on a subway in New York City, and he's traveling, and there's these kids that are just running up and down the subway, and he's very frustrated when he sees the father just spacing out. He's upset at them. Like, what kind of father is going to allow their kids running up and down the subway? And it comes to a point where one of them even spills someone's coffee, and he turns to them and says, "Excuse me, do you not realize that your children are causing havoc on the subway?" And the father says, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize. Thank you for letting me know. I'm a little absent-minded. We're coming from the hospital. My wife just passed away." And he had this moment of instantly feeling so stupid. You can just, those are the kinds of things that as a regular person judging someone else, we're supposed to remember the words of Hillel. Do not judge someone until you've stood in his place. That's not something you can see. It's not something you can hear. Torah says that's where we have to employ our sense, realizing there's so much we don't smell. Yeah.
This question presently of the young man who is the judge feels that he should be destroyed because he avoided fighting.
Which?
I mean, he just couldn't get himself to the point where he wanted to escape. He was, and was imprisoned by his,
Talking about Bergdahl?
Oh,
and how do you feel this is being resolved? Because he's now having suffered imprisonment that was,
I'm not well enough informed
yes.
about it to offer an opinion. It's a good,
Yeah.
it'd be a fascinating question. I'm not well informed enough to
But
offer
I have
an
another
opinion.
question,
Yeah,
if I
yeah,
may
it's a good question.
ask.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
happens with our feelings when we meet someone and we immediately like that person or we dislike that person without really having all that knowledge? Let's say, you don't know the person's background, but you have that sense. What is that? How do they explain it in the?
Because that's chemistry.
The smell.
No, it's not just chemistry. It is part of it. It is, but I mean.
I
what
think
is-
we
what
need
is
to
that?
really be honest with ourselves and ask ourselves, why is this? Is there anything that I can attribute this to? We cannot confuse this with being prejudiced and racial. It's this smell thing is very dangerous. On one hand, we're saying it can be very, very helpful and it can be used. You know what? Let's do a few more texts and then we'll jump into that. And I think this is why we say only Mashiach can ultimately do it. It's very easy to misuse this sense. Being that it is not empirical, being that it's not based upon facts, being that it's an intuition, what stops someone from saying, oh, I have this intuition? It's a dangerous sense. If you're using it for Hillel, you're using your sense to be not judge someone, to treat them kindly, that's good. But if you're using your smell to push away, that is dangerous. So here is where, even in Judaism, there are times where, I don't want to talk about people, but Pam, things. Something doesn't smell right. Mothers will tell you. Mothers have, I think, this gift. So this doesn't smell right for my children. And Torah says, yeah, we should judge that generally. I think once, who knows the time, there was a time in the Supreme Court where someone said, I know it when I see it. He wasn't able to pinpoint what it was. Yeah, it was, yeah. So what was the case, Marty?
I forget the case, but it was pornography.
It was a case in 1964. There was a movie theater owner who exhibited a very obscene film at that time. And there was a whole question in American law whether or not First Amendment rights should apply over here. Or there was another Ohio penalized him, said that it was not allowed to due to obscenity laws. And there was a whole question, and he said, look, I can't judge. I can't tell you why or why not this is correct, but I can tell you, I know it when I see it. So that idea of I know it when I see it would apply in a certain sense in Judaism. There's certain things that you can't specifically call out why there's a problem with it, but you would say it, I know it when I see it, or I smell it. And I think it's very true of children. And the Rebbe writes that there are even things, text 12a, the next text, Marty.
There are many things that are intangible. It is difficult to find anything explicit in the code of Jewish law that prohibits or permits it. There are indeed many things explicitly stated. One can point to a specific article in the code which states clearly that such and such is incompatible with Torah. However, there are many things that are not so, yet it is still entirely possible to discern whether or not they smell of Yirat Shamayim, fear of heaven, or God forbid the opposite.
There's an expression amongst rabbis. What does the sixth portion of Code of Jewish Law say about it? How many sections of the Code of Jewish Law are there? 5. What is the meaning of the sixth portion of Jewish law? A certain intuition, a certain sense of how does this smell. That's something that comes with age. That's something that comes with experience. If someone only uses the first 5, you can be a very black and white and not understand circumstances. But at the flip side it's very dangerous to venture into this sixth code of Jewish law, especially when someone is not in the right stage. Keep on reading.
This then is the idea of he smells a man and judges in a personal sense. In our times, prior to the coming of Mashiach, there are multiple of matters that we must approach with our sense of smell to sniff them out and see whether or not they increase our Torah and Yirat Shamayim. We are to render rulings on these premises, confidently and passionately fighting against matters that have been deemed incompatible with Yirat Shamayim by virtue of our
Sense of
smell.
so if something we see, this is bringing us to a place of the opposite of Yirat Shamayim. Yirat Shamayim means awe of God, fear of God, holiness, Torah. And someone says, but I don't see what's wrong with it, right? And you can't even articulate what's wrong with it, but you see that this is bringing to a state of immorality, a state of the opposite of holiness. That is where something smells wrong with it. And Judaism acknowledges there is a truth to that, but that is also something that has to be used very, very carefully. So Pam, going back to your question, I think when it comes to people, you have to be very, very careful before you say something doesn't smell right. When do you err on the side of, it's a difficult one. Maybe people around the room can, when do you,
I think you have to be careful, because if you have that sense,
Yes.
that something is not right, I don't say like totally like just, like forget about that person. I say,
Correct. Red flag.
proceed with caution. That's my take.
Right, and the flip side is you could have a society in which, again, people snap judgments are not good. And so it's a very careful line to have over here, and I have to think about the when to trust that, when not to trust that. But what I want the take-home here to be is that Torah acknowledges a reality beyond the 5 books of the Code of Jewish Law, beyond the facts, and that's employing our sense of smell, and that zooms into the essence. The holier a person is, the more spiritual a person is, the more in tune that is with what's right. Yes, Judy.
So I just thought of this example, and my mother-in-law, who's weird side is 50,
Mhm.
it's right around now.
Yeah.
When my sister-in-law was dating a young man, my mother-in-law had an aversion to him immediately.
Yeah.
She just said she doesn't want him, she didn't want him around. And I thought, what is she,
Yeah.
None of us could understand what she didn't like about this really nice guy.
Right.
Well, the really nice guy was a convict, and he was, in fact, stealing from them too.
So how does one differentiate personally when that is a bias, a prejudice, versus a holy sense of smell?
First time the other person opens their mouth.
No, really, this is a real question. How does one discern?
We thought she was nuts.
How does one discern? Now, if it's not people, if it's things, it's easier. Just stay away. Just stay away. This doesn't smell right. But if it has to do with relationships and people, one has to be very careful to proceed with caution about this. But look, the easiest take home here is to use the smell to judge favorably. Like Hillel said, don't judge someone until you're in their place. Don't just create a snap judgment based upon the facts that you see. There's a lot more going on in the essence. And I think that is definitely one take home. We have countless examples in our life. I'm sure if we went around the room, we can all talk about times where we judged just based upon what we saw and heard, didn't take the full person into our judgment, and we messed up. So that definitely is one take home over here. Reminding ourselves of Hillel's words, not judging someone. I don't know where the shoes came in, but until we stand in their place. That was the literal statement from the Talmud. Don't judge someone until you stand in their place. And part of that is also realizing that every person, not just their circumstances, but everyone God gives a different Yetzer Hara to, an evil inclination to. Okay? Different people have different challenges. Just because, thank God, I was never tested in that area of life, doesn't mean I can dismiss someone else who was. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not justifying the sin that they did. A sin is a sin. Sin might be wrong. But before I dismiss someone, just because to me that area of life is not challenging, that doesn't mean to someone else it isn't. And so often someone will say, that person's a horrible person, they're a hypocrite, how could they do such a thing? Maybe they were that person had a very strong Yetzer Hara, a very strong evil inclination in that area of life. Thank God you were never tested in that area of life. But before you dismiss the person entirely because of it, maybe had you been given that test, you would have failed even worse. And that's a beautiful way, on one hand, of not justifying what was done. The sin is a sin. But the flip side is not dismissing the person, not saying they're a rotten person because of it. Who you can't judge. You never know what goes on the inside of someone and how bad their Yetzer Hara is. And I think that's something we need to always think about. Any last thoughts? Yeah.
There are sayings like that, like we were saying in English, right? That so going about I forget what it was, but it's like it's easy for you to say. In other words, that's saying you're not in my shoes, so it's easy for you to say what I should be doing. So that's in English.
Yeah. But I something I think about often, how Hashem sends down each soul with specific talents and strengths, but also specific urges and temptations and obstacles. So it's not just nurture, it's also nature. Nurture is a big part of it, the environment where they grew up, that's big, but there's also a nature component to it. Different people have different, from biologically, impulses and challenges, whether it's anger, whether it's jealousy, whether it's and we have to remember the words of Hillel, and we have to use our smell to really get the essence of the person and to judge them favorably. Yes.
So I'm wondering, maybe I missed it. I'm wondering why Joseph, who says he fears God,
Can't hear.
why Joseph, who says he fears God, doesn't or employs any sense of smell or smell issues in the whole Joseph story. If he's going to set up a situation to help the brothers reconcile and have tshuva and all this other stuff that he's trying to set, face the same challenges once over again, watch it. He's depending on action and visually watching them and what they say and how they respond, rather than on...
He has an intuition going on throughout this whole story. She's rewinding earlier in the story where Joseph makes life miserable for the brothers. And we discussed it on Shabbat, this past Shabbat, and this little, if anyone has to go, we go, because it's late, but what gave him the right to try to get them to do teshuvah, okay?
Well, that wasn't what my question was. My question is, where does the sense of smell come in that story? And if it does come, I missed it.
Right.
And if it doesn't
What
come
we
in,
were talking about today is more of why it was that sneeze the Talmud associates with death. And we're saying because sneeze is essence.
Okay.
Sense is essence, unlike the other ones. And what that means in practical terms is eyesight and hearing zoom into specifics. Smell is associated with essence. And therefore, about Mashiach, we'll be able to determine the person's essence. And in our lives as well, we have to be able to utilize the sense to judge someone on their essential level, even beyond just the facts, but to use it carefully. Use it only for the good. All right, we'll hold it over here.
Thank you, Amnon.
Oh,
Thank
you're
you.
welcome. I just wanted to mention that we had a new listener still with us, Angie Scher from Sydney, Australia, said that my shul has stopped our ladies' lunch and learn for the last few weeks. So she came here and she found you here.
From Sydney, Australia. Beautiful.
Oh, yay.
Thank you so much, and thank you to Amnon Nissan Communications for hosting this programming and making it available to everyone all over the world to tune in. Have a good week, and we will, God willing, resume in 3 weeks.
And you also want to say hi to Anne and Cheryl on in the chat.
Anne and Cheryl as well are listening in.
Yay.
Yes, Shikoh.
Come back in January.
All right.
All right.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, Health In with Debbie Brooke, Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Lessons of Vietnam with NCVVI members, The Tanya Love Show, Your Healthy Pet with Gisela DiCarlo. And if you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it at www.nissancommunications.com. Sponsored by Atomus.com, makers of quality video recorders and converters for professionals, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.